Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. My name is Boris, and I'm the founder of the company, and normally, together with me, I'll have a guest. However, this episode is a little bit more special because I don't have a guest, or maybe I have many. Who knows? We'll see. This episode, again, it's a little bit more special because the world changed, and as the world changed, the way we presented changed. Everything became, and everything is now, or mostly our presentations are being delivered online. And I'm completely sure that you know about that, and I'm completely sure that you experienced online presentations. Maybe you are consuming them, and if that's the case, well, you probably don't like most of them. That's just a guess though. Or maybe you are from the other side, right? As a presenter, where you are being asked to now deliver a presentation over a tool like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, Cisco WebEx, whatever. That's the same for us. In the last 18 months or so, we have delivered dozens of trainings and trained probably thousands of people on the topic of truly effective online presentations. And because of that, we ended up having not just this course on presenting virtually that's highly desirable by many of the biggest brands out there, but also we ended up doing some other things that I really want you to know about. The first one is a deck that we created especially for the guys and gals at pitch.com. That's again on the topic of presenting virtually. You will find it in the show notes under this episode. And trust me, you have to see it. It consists everything that every business professional needs to know to prepare, design, and deliver a truly effective online presentation. Then what else do we have? Well, if you are listening to this one, be that on Spotify or any other platform or YouTube, you will probably see that if you go to our shop, 356labs.com/shop, you will see that we ended up building and writing a whole book on the topic of presenting virtually, which is beautifully designed. You have to see that one. So go to our shop and check it out. And third, we also, as part of our conference, Present to Succeed conference, we covered that topic tremendously well, I would say, in the first edition of the event, but we'll do it even better in 2022, in April 2022, when a person who doesn't need any introduction because she is an Emmy Award winner and LinkedIn Learning's top instructor, Jessica Chen, will actually teach you on the specifics of online presentations, together with other people like number one body language expert Mark Bowden, the Ritz-Carlton co-founder Horst Schulze, and many, many more. That being said, it's still early bird prices, and it's still the time for early bird tickets. So did you get your early bird ticket? Hopefully so. So what is this episode all about? Well, it's some of the top moments on the topic of virtual presentations from our guests from the last, I would say, 100 episodes. So I'll leave it here, enough from me, leaving it to the first one of our guests, whose name is John Zimmer, who has a very interesting take not only on where you should place your camera for maximum impact, but also about something that's called asynchronous communication and how you can utilize that type of communication to better convey your message to your colleagues or your clients. So let's go to John. Like, what about the mistakes that you see with your customers? Because we were mentioning this word, COVID, and staying at home and presenting online through the web, etc. What are the things that you are seeing with your clients in regards to online presenting that they need to focus a little bit more on? Maybe because they're considering virtual presentations the same as in person. We see that a lot, and I'm like, that's strange.
I mean,
What are you seeing there?
the challenges range from the logistical to more fundamental things. When it comes to logistics, one of the
Okay.
simplest things that people can do, and I'm still surprised after all this time more people are not doing it, is to raise the camera to eye level, like you and I have right now. And when you speak, don't talk to the screen. So right now I'm looking at you, which is by far my preference because I can see you and I see your reaction. And this is how we are as humans. But now you're seeing me and everybody's seeing me on the recording. I'm looking down, which breaks the connection. You've got to lift your eyes up and speak
Yep.
to the camera. When I first started off, I kept looking at people's faces. And so I just took a big post-it note and put an arrow on it and stuck it next to the camera for the first couple of weeks. And it just kept pulling my eyes back up. And now I'm just used to speaking to the camera. So little things like that logistically can make a big impact. If we go more fundamentally, and this is something that I think, especially in companies where you have people calling their teams together to present something and everybody works with each other, I think not enough people are taking advantage of what I call what's an asynchronous presentation. In other words, why have
Mm.
all the team members assemble at a certain time to listen to me give a formal presentation? I could just as easily record the presentation, send it out to my team members, and say, watch this presentation before our meeting next Friday. Then, Joe's going to watch it while
Hmm.
eating
All right.
breakfast, and Jane's going to watch it while she's on the treadmill, and people will watch it when it's convenient to them. But then what happens on at the Friday meeting? We all come to that meeting. Everybody has seen my presentation, and we can immediately start working on it. We can start engaging. I can send them off into breakout rooms to do things, because that's when online interactions become much more stimulating. It's when you get people involved, you get them doing things. And yes, they can answer polls and do things like that, but it's really when they're, I think, taking part and discussing and sharing their ideas and perspectives. So that's one way that I think a lot of businesses could make a better use of these online presentations.
Have you seen at least some of your clients apply that for some of the meetings that they would
A couple
otherwise
after
schedule?
speaking with them, a couple of them have done it. And they liked it. They said it was much more productive. I think it puts a little more
Mhm.
responsibility on the speaker, because if I'm the speaker, I now have to set up my recording and make sure it's right and make sure am I happy with it, and then I have to send it out, and then I also have to go to the meeting. But it's like anything else. More effort going in, better product coming out.
Interesting ideas from John Zimmer here. You see where you have to place your camera? Very important tip here. And the idea for the asynchronous communication, I haven't actually used it myself, but I'm planning to do so. And I highly recommend you check it out and you try it for yourself in your organization too. The next guest is Dan Keldsen from Plexicam. If you don't know Plexicam, you have to check them out. In this short take, we selected a few moments from Dan's visit in our podcast where he was talking not exactly about virtual presentations, but how when you are presenting online, you can take those presentations and just push your brand online to be more visible and thus extract a lot of attention out of it. Listen to what Dan has to say here.
Google exists, right? Maybe you use Bing. You might be one of the people out
Very
of
few people, yeah.
1,000 that are still using Bing. Yahoo apparently still exists. I don't know if you can search on Yahoo. I don't remember
I
that.
don't think
I
I
haven't
don't know.
tried that in a while. But you have a footprint out there in the world. So if somebody sees, oh, you're presenting on a topic at this event at this day, who's this person? You can Google them. You can find evidence of what you think or what you say or what you write or what you present or a podcast you're on or any of these kinds of things.
Yep.
And instead of the blurb that's there, you can decide for yourself, is it going to be worth my time that I might learn something or reinforce something or get inspired based on that past evidence? And that's a new thing. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that like self-publishing, there's millions of self-published books now that can be instantly published on Amazon, the biggest book marketplace that's ever existed, right? So if you want to attract people, part of it is leave evidence, leave things that they can see and judge for themselves. So it's much better if they can decide in advance that they already like you. That's part of what makes it much easier to connect with your audience in that one live presentation that they happen to find you in.
Mhm.
And I still find a lot of people who feel like, my presentation this makes no sense to me, but my presentation is special and needs to be locked away and nobody should ever see it unless they see me do it live.
Yeah, especially with
I get
with
the
professional speakers. I mean, especially.
yeah. Yeah, I think I mean like Tom Peters is, he's an old guy now, but he's very famous as a business management guru.
Mm,
McKinsey in Search of Excellence. I always slightly mess up the book, but he has always for a long time given away. He has these massive decks, which is probably part of the reason I started using huge huge decks. But he's always, like, every single presentation he's ever given for the last 30 years or so is online. He gives away the slides because he wants those ideas to get out there
yeah.
and for people to find them and come back to him. And that's part of what I mean. And so a side benefit of that is potentially, who knows, maybe the guy that you were talking about already heard about you, knew that you had interesting things to say about templates, and he just wanted to punctuate it by verifying it during that one presentation,
Yep.
and then he reached out. So you don't really, you might want to ask him, was that the first time or not? Maybe he remembers. But and this kind of thing has happened to me a lot, which is why I want to make sure I share it with people. So, for example, the largest consulting gig that I ever had happened because of a tweet that I didn't even mean to send. And yeah, and I'm still friends with a guy who read it.
All right.
It was not that tweet though. It was everything that I had said before that,
Mm,
everything that I'd done. I had a podcast series at that point too that I started in 2006. I was talking about lots of different things, and it was the end of the day. I was rushing out of the office. I was like, oh, I have this idea. I should probably turn that into a blog post, but I'll just jot down. Should I do Twitter? Or should I send myself an email? I'll do Twitter. And I typed in the message, and I don't even remember, I could find it, but it was essentially, I'm seeing the intersection of these 3 or 4 ideas. Um, Anybody else seeing this? Something like that. And then next morning, I got an email. I got a direct message, and I got an email. I actually did not get it. It was only direct message, and it was kind of a anonymous account, which it
mm,
turns out that was for the legal department of this massive corporation, which was Lowe's Home Improvement, Fortune 42 at that point. Um, I had no idea there was somebody in a position of any power whatsoever. It was just some random
yeah.
anonymous account. Said, "Oh my God, you're the only person I've ever seen talking about this. We have to talk." Okay. I got a call the next day, and hey, I'm the guy that tweeted to you last night. Okay, we talked, and who are you, by the way? And his name's Kevin Davis. His nickname is the Data Man. I've been very good friends with him ever since, and that resulted in a totally no bid, no competition consulting gig.
Yeah.
That was a 6-figure gig that came literally was punctuated by that one tweet that I didn't even mean to send.
Yeah, and that's where the budget for Plexi came from. Anyway,
It didn't
anyway,
last that long. That
no,
was like 2008 or something.
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, what I'm hearing saying is, hey, treat your online brand, online presence seriously, right?
Yes.
Because you never know. Also, that presence, how it can pay off, right?
Yeah.
In the context of your business relationships, business world, and overall professional, or to be honest, even in your personal life, it may be, yeah. We have seen a lot of examples, I think, with especially with celebrities, where people just go back 7 years in their Twitter account to just dig in for something, like, and then
Right.
it becomes a mess in the media.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
But don't
yeah,
be afraid of Twitter.
yeah, yeah, of course. But yeah, that is very, very good advice. I think everyone should definitely be listening to this one, no matter of the platforms that you are using. I, for example, search, like, very frankly, every single candidate for for our company when we are hiring people. Like, I search them all over the web, like, and I
Hmm.
spend, like, time trying to figure out, do they have this account, do they have an Instagram, do they have a LinkedIn, do they have a TikTok, like, whatever it is. I want to explore their whole life and see
Hmm.
what's going on, because
Hmm.
that gives me, as you said, signs and information who they are. And
Right.
at some point, you never, yet again, you never know who can see it, and maybe, as in your case, invite you to deliver a presentation on a specific topic, or just
Right.
because of, I don't know, a LinkedIn post that you shared, your boss sees it and now thinks about you in a different way because the post that you shared was a very intriguing post, which means
Right.
that you're thinking in that direction, which now makes it very interesting for your manager to say to themselves, wait a minute, this person is like really obviously chasing another level in his career or her career. That's interesting.
Right.
I have to have that in mind, right?
Right. Yep.
That's more or less your direction, right? More or less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
in some ways that could scare people because do I need to watch everything that I say or do or post online?
Yeah.
Don't be paranoid about it.
Of course. Of
But
course.
it is, especially in larger organizations, if you're you're not born to be instantly made a CEO upon adulthood, probably, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in a larger organization, you don't go straight to the top typically,
Of course.
so you're going to need to, but the only way to get there is to get known by somebody,
Yeah.
so you can keep advancing. You should be doing good work. You should do what you say you're going to do. You should own your mistakes, things like that. But if you can also leverage an outside force like LinkedIn, and you are promoting like a consistent view on how to be great at sales, whatever the topic happens to be, if it is a great I'm also sort of obsessed with side doors. So if you can not have to pound through the front door to get to a potential client that you want to work with or a partner or whatever, and you can find somebody who's of a like mind with you and is interested in things, and you can start to have a conversation with them. For me, it's primarily on LinkedIn, but it could be Twitter, YouTube, Instagram,
Yeah.
name your channel.
Yeah.
But that can help you scoot around some of the things that are meant to keep you out or prevent you from advancing, and sidestep it and maybe jump into maybe you got a job at your dream company, but it's not the dream position, but you're starting to get known by the people in that area that you want to
Yeah.
go to, really. And if you get on their radar, then it's much easier for them to say, hey, I'd like you to join my team, instead of you telling your boss, I don't like you
Yeah.
and I want to go work over here.
Yeah.
It's a very different dynamic. So you can sort of plant these seeds and see what happens. There's no guarantee, but if you don't do that, it's much
Yeah.
harder. I spent a lot of time on Twitter, and that's part of the reason that I ended up with the story that I already told.
Yeah. Of course.
Um, and just so I'll try to tie it to what we already talked about and
Yeah.
what you just asked. So the first keynote that I ever presented was at a 5,000 person event called the Enterprise 2.0 conference in Boston, and I had been very active on Twitter. That was a hot topic in Twitter,
Mm.
and as a result, I was pretty well known. Um, and the moment that I walked off the stage, there were literally like 30 people standing right off the stage. I knew all of them, even though I'd never met any of them.
Because of Twitter.
And it was awesome. And I walked out, I was like, oh my God, it's Laura and it's Bob and it's, and, I wasn't monitoring, because at that point I wasn't comfortable trying to monitor hashtags as you're presenting. That was a thing for a while, where, one screen was dedicated. Here's a huge stream of
Yeah.
stuff just
Yeah.
flying
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
That I love the idea, but that was not for me. It's still not for me, but,
Not for me
but
anymore
that was,
either.
I mean, to what we've been talking about, because I was already known, they could have never seen me do a keynote before that, because I had never done one before
Yeah.
that. And I punctuated it, and we were presenting some fresh research about big companies and how they're using these technologies, which was a huge topic. That was the topic of that event, what ran for 7 years or so, I want to say. And, that, and there was my tribe, so to speak. And then as a result of that, that's part of the reason that I got known by Kevin, because he was part of a group of large enterprise customers who cared about Enterprise 2.0.
Yeah.
And that's how he had started stalking me, because he actually was not allowed to post anything on Twitter
Okay.
because of legal concerns by the Lowe's law department. And, and on all of my slides at that point, I would have at Dan Keldsen, because that was my Twitter handle, and that's where all the action was happening. And, as I didn't know it at the time, but I suspected that by the time I got off the stage, there would be a bunch of tweets referencing me, pointing to me, building out more awareness about what I was doing and the things that I care about. And all you have to do is set the stage for that. Not no pun intended. Just, set it so that you've made that environment where it's possible that people can find you, want to refer you, like, hey, at Dan Kelson, you should talk to Luis Suarez,
Yeah.
who's an IBM guy that I still talk to, and it's been 14 years since we first met.
I completely agree with everything that Dan talked about in this episode. And if you haven't listened to the whole episode, I highly, highly recommend it. Next up, however, is Sally Z, as she likes to say. In this take, you will hear her talking about putting intentionality behind your virtual presentations. Plus, she will mention something very interesting about some tools that she is utilizing, like Ecamm Live, which runs only on Mac, but still, and the now very, very popular tool that's called OBS Studio. Let's go to Sally. When you have to take in mind the virtual space, what do you
Yeah.
advise the people that are working with you?
Yep. I want you to bring that same intentionality. Now, depending on the platform, sometimes that is more challenging because for Zoom, for example, the audience has more control over what they see. You have some as the presenter, but they have more. But I think it's worth taking a moment and saying, here's the setup that I recommend for you. In order for you to experience this in the most engaging way, my suggestion for you is to go up to that top bar, click down to view, and click side by side. That way, you're going to be able to see me right next to my slides or whatever. I'm making that up, but you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
create that sort of intention with your virtual space. I also think virtually we're missing so many opportunities to play some music, to use a system like Ecamm or another technology or mode that allows us to come off more professionally and to not see this as just another Zoom meeting, because
Yeah.
we have to elevate those opportunities, and a little intention goes a really long way in the virtual setup, and the bar for engagement is even higher.
Yeah.
Because of course we all know it's so easy for people to just go click on other tabs or pick up their phone. They don't have to. They don't have to be engaged in the same way that they might feel compelled out of politeness to
Yeah.
if they were in person. So I think the virtual space is even more important to be intentional and not just do what we've always done. I feel like that is the the push that I'm always giving, especially to my corporate clients, is just because it's the way you've always done it doesn't mean that's the way that you should keep doing it.
Yeah.
Create the new, this is the way we do it.
Yeah.
And you can
By the way, when
every
you're saying
presentation.
Yeah, when you're saying all of that, and I want to come back after a second to the software probably that you're mentioning, Ecamm, because I personally
Yeah.
don't know that one. Let me know
Mm,
what I think everyone will benefit what this is. I can guess potentially what it could be, but
sure.
I
Happy
will
to tell you
leave it
about
to you. I will leave it to you as the person who mentioned it. One of the very interesting things, I don't remember which was the book exactly, but it was all about presenting virtually and virtual presentations, etc. I have to find it, but there was one quote from the author of the book that I think more or less sounds exactly like what you're saying. That
it. Hmm.
nowadays people, I'm not going to quote it like it won't be a one-to-one quote here, but it was more or less saying that because it's online, people who are presenting online, that's their excuse for not being good, right?
Yeah,
Just because it's online, they find a reason. They use the fact that it's online for not delivering in a good way, which
exactly.
is, I don't think
Not
that's
good.
right.
Not good. Yeah, I
Not good.
mean, people have lowered the bar a little bit.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't need to stand up and practice because I'm
Yeah.
just going to be sitting on my butt and I can have my notes right here. Nobody's really looking at the camera. And I'm like, look at the camera, please. Just that little
Yeah.
thing. Know where your camera is and look at it. It sounds so simple, but it
Yeah.
makes such a big difference. And when you have multiple monitors and the people you're talking to are over here, but your camera is here,
Yeah.
that it takes practice to remember that there's a human on the other side of that camera. This camera right here. Like I know you're here, but Boris is actually right here.
Yeah.
You
Correct.
know?
Correct. I'm actually going to find the quote after maybe a second or two. It's that I'm opening a presentation right here. But there was a
Yeah.
little bit about the software that you mentioned. What is
Yeah.
it all about? Ecamm.
Yes. So Ecamm is a live streaming software.
Got it.
So it allows you to kind of set up the experience of your live stream. So you can live stream into a Zoom meeting. You can live stream into Facebook, into YouTube, into all kinds of different platforms. And it just looks really, really good. So you can add in overlays. You can upload a PowerPoint or other software or SlideShare that you've got. You can um, show movies, you can do all kinds of different things, and it sets it up really as a show. So you almost are producing a show as you go. So you
Mm.
can click different scenes. So one scene is your intro, and there's music, and there's an overlay that comes in with your title and name. And then the next scene, you screen share into a presentation, but you are in the corner in like a little circle, still being able to be present while your slides are showing. So it just gives you, there's a million things you can do with it. It's really fun. It's not super difficult to learn. It takes a little bit of an on ramp, but it's not, if I can do it, anybody else can do it. I'm not super techie, but it
Yeah.
has every time I live stream with Ecamm, people go, "That looks amazing! What is that software?" Any of us can do it, and you can connect fancy cameras with it and all the things. You can do all the things.
Yeah,
They're
I've already found it and copy pasted the link to their platform so that we put it in the show notes. So it's called
awesome.
Ecamm with double M, correct?
Yes, I
Yeah.
would. Yep, two M's. I will say I think it's only for Macs. This
Yes,
might be a
that's correct.
problem. Might be a problem for some people, but there's another one. I think the PC version is called like OBM.
OBS Studio, yes.
OBS. Yeah, see,
Yeah,
I don't know.
OBS. Yeah,
I'm a
OBS
Mac
looks
person, so
yeah, OBS looks a little bit more not user friendly than this one.
yeah,
And I will personally double check and test this one on our Macs here so that I have the kind of the
awesome.
experience with it. The OBS is quite professional, I would say. And when you
Okay.
open it for the first time, you're like, if you're not an AV guy, you're like,
Yeah.
where
Ooh.
am I exactly? Like, what's going? Like, what's
No.
happening to me? Like, there is a learning curve. Let's just put it
Oh
this
no.
way. But yeah, thankfully there is a lot of resources and a lot of
Yeah.
tutorials and stuff
Yeah.
out there on the web to find how to use OBS Studio in a
Cool.
in a way, in a professional way. Let's put it this way. Reading the quote, it's from David Kerringham, and he wrote the book "A Better Online Presenting." So the quote is, and I'm quoting now:
Yeah.
"Biggest issue is that people take online as an excuse for lower standards."
Mm-hmm.
Not a good
There
idea,
it is.
everybody. Not a
Put
good
that in a
idea.
quote bubble.
And now that you know about Ecamm and OBS Studio and many more, let's go to our next guest, whose name is Johnny Quinn. Johnny will talk a little bit and share some advices around engagement and how you keep your audience on the other side of their screens engaged. He'll mention some things around tools like Kahoot, Mentimeter, Slido, and more. So listen to his take here. Let's now shift gears though and talk about engagement. What are the tools you advise the people around you to utilize to make sure that they keep their audiences engaged?
Yeah, I mean, look, the the thing is that as we've mentioned, interaction is the difference between a monologue and a dialogue, and I think all presenters have to be brave to try this. It's not instinctive in us. A lot of presenters go to their comfort zone, which is I'm going to present and I'm going to pretend the audience aren't there. You know what I mean? It's sort of thing. And Zoom hasn't helped us with that. I mean, you're presenting into a black hole sometimes. There's not even a face looking at you. You've got no presence. There isn't really telepresence. You know what I mean on Zoom. So how do you get that presence? And what I urge you to try and do is to try and create an engagement. And look, well, let's look at what's free. Yeah, let's forget about cost at all. What's completely free is for you to ask a question. Just ask a question. It could be a rhetorical question, non-rhetorical question, but ask a question. How many of you have ever considered life insurance? So just it's as simple as that. Yeah. And we often talk about that as an opener. To start with a question really creates engagement. If you want to then layer on and get some real answers from the audience, then use the free polling options in Zoom and Teams. It's right there. It's, if you've got the paid version of Zoom, you've got the option for polling. You can poll the audience. They all press a button and you get an immediate response. Just try it. You will see an amazing reaction from the audience, and also you will get a warm feeling inside as a presenter, because you've connected with people and you've really created a connection. So using things like Kahoot, and by the way, I'll make sure that I give you all of these URLs for your show notes. So Kahoot is Kahoot. It's a free system. And, kids, Gen Zs are doing this already. They're sitting in classes playing Kahoots all day, every day. So, the millennials of us and the X's and the boomers, we haven't been brought up with this, but the younger generations are coming through expecting this, and they actually use this. So polls and breakouts, are another great way, but use Kahoot, and the Zoom polls are the way to connect with those. Then looking at kind of lower cost solutions, the $50, $100 type marks. Please don't quote me on that. Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, Slido. Now Slido is kind of per event, but these are awesome audience engagement tools. And then layering on into the sort of higher level costs, would be things like Turning Technologies. We have to buy a whole kit of keypads if you're going to run an AGM and you want to get weighted voting. Then that's a completely different element. But then also bringing in some of the event apps like Event Mobi, or some of the other elements that are out there. So there's a whole range of different sort of levels to it as you move through. And I'll make sure that you get some show notes from me around what I recommend and what's. But bear in mind, there are thousands of suppliers in this market, and Mentimeter might be your favorite, or Slido. So there will be different levels in terms of what people use and what they're used to. But the main thing is to try it. Try audience engagement. Very often people think about the slides and the content and the storytelling, and then they think about themselves and body language and presenting themselves well, and they tend to forget the audience, and that's the third part of the formula of an alive audience, is really engaging the audience and getting them engaged. So promise you, once you try audience engagement, it becomes a little bit of a hook, and you start loving it, and you can start layering on things like, well, let's play gamification. Why don't we do our whole presentation as a quiz, for example? And that brings us on into then meeting architecture and changing the whole architecture of the meeting. But that's another story for another day.
Brilliant advices from Johnny again, as always. Now, however, let's move on to one of our speakers at Present to Succeed Conference 2022, Jessica Chen, who was already part of our podcast and who was a guest on our podcast already. And she talked about virtual presentations with me for an hour or so. In this little clip and in this little audio part, if you are not consuming the video, you will hear Jessica talking about the power of Prezi Video, something that Prezi has built separately than their product, and also what are the specific types of virtual presentations that you will be asked to deliver, or maybe you're already delivering, and how you should adapt towards each and every one of those specific cases. Let's listen to Jessica, because when she speaks, you have to listen.
So, more or less, I think 2020 made us realize that remote working is going to stay in some capacity. Will it be to the extent of what 2020 was, where everyone's locked down? Absolutely not. But a lot of corporate companies I'm working with are now saying that they are transitioning in terms of their company will be able to support employees who do want to work from home now. So in 1 year, in 2 years, I do think there's going to be an element to it in a lot of organizations. But here's the also other thing. If your organization is 100% back to normal now, right? Everybody's traveling, flying. It was like pre-COVID days. If your client wants to jump on a video call, you have to still be prepared in knowing how to present yourself on video, right? You always want to show up where your clients want to show up. So that's kind of what I always say. I do think, fortunately, this isn't going to be a forever situation, but I do think video calls more or less is going to stay.
All right. So talking about the virtual world, obviously big topic. You're also really indeed sharing so much content on LinkedIn. So everyone, as Jessica said, follow her on LinkedIn, period, for sure. What do you see is so different? Like, do you see, and what in your opinion are the differences between, hey, your clients were presenting in an in-person manner and in in-person fashion, and now they move to this virtual world. What is different for them, and what do you teach them so that they are at least that successful in the virtual delivery again?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. So, one of the hardest things about presenting on video is making sure the audience is listening the whole time. It is so easy when you're presenting on video and, within a few minutes, people just kind of start losing interest. That's a very natural thing to happen because all of us are just forced to stare at our computer screen, the 12 by 13-inch computer screen. And unless your speaking is fantastic, people are going to pick up their phones, they're going to start texting, they're going to start browsing, right? That is truly the hardest thing about presenting on video. But I will say it's not impossible. So, that this is where I always say, so making sure, your camera is on, you're using your body language to communicate because they can see that your body, what you do with your hands is part of you showing that engagement. But ultimately, it's your tone of voice. Your tone of voice is that it's really that golden ticket in getting people to really want to listen to what you're saying. So perhaps in-person presentation, you haven't had to think of it as much, but truly when we're now presenting on video, it's really about your body language and your tone of voice. Of course, your presentation deck, Boris, as you probably know, also matters. You don't want it to be very dense with text. It has to be there to accentuate your message. So all these things are really important.
And you also, by the way, looks like you're a fan of Prezi Video. I've seen some of your presentations using Prezi Video, and we had Spencer from Prezi, who's also going to speak at our conference later, talking about this new innovation that Prezi brought. How did you get involved with Prezi Video? How did you find it? What's the case there? What happened?
Yeah. So I really have to give all the credit to Lorraine. So if Lorraine's listening to this, so Lorraine, she's part of their editorial team, and she was the one that reached out to me. And I believe she was actually previously LinkedIn. So she worked at LinkedIn, and then she moved over to Prezi. But fantastic, she basically found me because of the content I was doing on LinkedIn, and because I guess my forte, so to speak, is video, right? She was like, this makes sense, right? So let's bring on Jessica. So we had a few kind of projects we all did together. I've helped their team with creating some additional content. It's truly been fantastic. It's a really great platform for modern day video presentations.
Yeah, so that's how that collaboration started. Interesting.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah. Prezi really did a good job, I think, with Prezi Video. That was one of those things that really differentiated them yet again. Like they were different before, but now with this Prezi Video, it is completely different story. So for everyone who still doesn't know what Prezi Video is, Google it. Very easy to do. Or as you can imagine, most of your talks are with Prezi Video though, or at least not most, but many, right? There are at least a dozen for sure.
Yeah, I will say, I really do think that when you start using Prezi, like there is kind of a learning curve because the way you build your presentation is completely different. But once it's done, the fact that you can interact with your presentation is huge.
Brilliant take from Jessica here again. We cannot wait for her to join us at the conference. One last guest here in this episode, and his name is Rob Geraghty. Rob is a absolutely incredible communicator. He focuses tremendously and a lot on the context of virtual presentations. And I want you to hear, we are going back, all right? We are going back to engagement because Rob has to offer some other tips and tricks on engaging a virtual audience. So we haven't heard those all still as part of this podcast. So let's include them here for you to know.
What's the biggest challenge about presenting virtually? And we get people to chat the answers in. And I would say 50% of the things that people chat in use that word engagement and audience engagement. So what do we encourage people to do to engage? Well, the principle that I want to share comes from the mindset section of the framework. And the principle is to involve your audience early and often. So I think with a virtual presentation, even more than with a face-to-face presentation, and I would have been arguing this if we were talking about face-to-face presentations, I'd have still said involve your audience. Now I'm saying do it more, but do it early and often. So what do I mean by early? So again, that example I've just shared, we start that session at 2 o'clock. At 2:03 p.m., we are asking our audience to all chat in what their biggest challenge is. And then straight away, having, with 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 chat comments in there, we then go to the people and we go and say, Boris, you wrote in there that you're struggling with making better slides. Explain what you mean by that. We hear from Boris. Then we go to Mary, then we go to Steve, then we go to John. So what we do in the first 10 minutes is we get the audience involved and participating in the presentation. I guess the whole mindset behind this is also, it's moving away from broadcast, moving away from talking at the audience to a presentation is something that we do with the audience, that we involve them, we hear their views. So it's about involving them early enough. So again, what I see, so many people want to involve their audience. So many people so far would go, yeah, I agree with everything Rob's saying. But then when they actually come to do it, they don't do it. And they might say to the audience, I want to make it really involving today and really engaging and really get you involved. But then they talk at the audience. And then they think, okay, let's try and get the audience involved. And they go, what does anybody think about what I've said? And it goes silent. And they go, anybody? Anybody? Help me out here. And then 3 people jump in at once and speak. So then we've got a mess. So this is where the technique of first name first comes in. So as the presenter, what I will do is I will signpost who I want to speak to. So I'm going to say, we've been talking about what's a healthy breakfast, Boris. So I'd like to hear from some of you in our audience today about what you've had for breakfast this morning. So Boris, I'm going to come to you with this question. And then Mary, I'm going to come to you. Can you share with us what you had for breakfast? Boris, let's start with you. So do you see what I'm doing, Boris, with this first name first?
Yeah, absolutely. You more or less put something like a frame and you restrict everyone who was not called by name to unmute themselves and make the mess that otherwise can happen.
Absolutely. And the reason why, because again, it's really easy to go, what do you think about Einstein's theory of relativity, Boris? And poor Boris is on the spot here. And he goes, oh, sorry, I lost the connection there, which means he wasn't listening. Yeah. So again, the reason why we go first name right at the front is that sort of wakes up that individual. And then we put the question. Actually, before the question, we often do some filler. So we often say, for example, Boris, I'm going to come to you with this next question. Now, that bit there, that I'm going to come to you, that was just filler content.
Yeah.
Then I said the question, what did you have for breakfast? And then what I'm also doing is always signposting the second person. So let's say I've now heard from you, Boris. I'm now going to go to Mary. And when I go to Mary, I say, oh, and we're going to come to you now, Mary. And then we're going to come to Stephen. So I'm always signposting where I'm going to go next. Now, look, even if you haven't been chosen, you haven't been brought in this way, I still feel as though you feel when you're in the audience that, well, the audience, we as the people on the listeners have been represented. And I think it also does keep people on their toes that, well, he might come to me next. And I'm not doing this in a sort of, school teacher way that I'm going to put you on the spot and make a fool of you, Boris. It's just that, well, look, I want to hear from you.
Great tips by Rob too, right? Did you take something new? Did you take some new ideas? I'm sure you did. So my call to action for you, everyone who is listening, everyone who is watching, is plan and try some of those ideas in your next virtual presentation. Just take some of those ideas and try to implement them. And while working on your presentation, don't forget to also check our website, 356labs.com, the book that we have on the topic in our shop. Take a look at the presentation that we have created also for pitch.com, And of course, join us at Present to Succeed Conference 2022. You can still get a ticket for less than 50 euros, which is a bargain. Thanks for listening. Subscribe if you still haven't. Follow us on YouTube, and you know how it goes. Every share, like, or comment matters. Thanks again for listening, and see you in the next one.